Hey, good morning, or good afternoon. I'm sorry. It's so good to see you guys online. My name is Kerry Huffer, and I am the Fine Arts Director here at Boulevard. You probably have seen me up on stage playing the keyboard or on occasion leading worship. You might see me up in the sound booth doing stuff, or I teach the music classes here at the school. So um, anyway, you've probably seen me around, but today I get to share with you in the Bible study of James. Now, we're not talking about James McCracken, although he is in the room with me, but we are talking about the letter that James, the brother of Jesus, wrote to a bunch of Jewish Christians. And last week, James McCracken did kick this study off, talking about who James was and who he was writing to, and what the purpose of this letter was that he wrote. I actually was going through the book of James a couple of weeks ago and was thinking how appropriate and meaningful it is right now, considering all our circumstances, what's going on in our country and in our world. And so I'm so glad that we get to share in this. One of the first things, though, I noticed was the very, very beginning of the book, starting in verse 2, it says, "Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds." Now, I have to admit, my first reaction was, seriously? Right now? Trials of many kinds, when we're going through a pandemic, when we're having racial riots and looting, when they're requiring me to wear a mask to Walmart, or when people around me aren't wearing their masks to Walmart, or when I can't even find toilet paper or wipes. You want me to rejoice in all those situations? Give me a break here, James. Um, but as James McCracken mentioned last week, the letter of James was written to a bunch of Jewish Christians who were scattered all over the world. It was addressed to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. Now, I don't know why they were scattered. I'm not really a biblical scholar in that manner, but I do know that a lot of history talks about the Jewish people being carried off or taken away or forced from their native land. And I do know that nothing was more precious to the Jews than their homeland. So for them to be living abroad, away from Israel, from their homeland, away from the place that they loved, was probably pretty traumatic. And they were probably living away from people that they loved as well. Uh, James mentioned that they were probably poor, oppressed, uh, out of favor with the current governments. And as Jewish Christians, they probably were not in high regard with other Jews as well. So I think those things might be considered trials. I think they might have had a handle on what trials were. So, but James still says, consider all of these things as joy. And I have to admit, that is not my first reaction when things go wrong, is to rejoice. In fact, my first reaction is probably to grumble or to complain, and even about pretty simple and petty things like catching a red light at the stop sign, or the stoplight, or getting behind a slow motorist when I'm in a hurry, and I'm pretty much always in a hurry. Or when I stub my toe on my way to bed, and I've turned out the light, and I do a pretty good fair amount of grumbling and complaining at those times. I do not typically rejoice at that. Um, don't leave me in the dark alone on this. Surely you all have some things that you grumble and complain about too. If you want to mention that in the comments, go right ahead. Feel free. Um, when my grandmother was in her 80s, she had a massive stroke. She did recover enough that she was able to go home and live there with help, obviously, and people checking on her on a regular basis. At one point, my mom had gone to help her out and was trying to get her to drink more water. And so she had given her a glass of water, and my grandmother was holding on to it, going, "Oh, it's so cold. I don't like holding on. It makes my hands cold." And Mom said, "Well, I can get you a napkin or a paper towel or something and wrap it around the glass so it's not so cold." And my grandmother said, I'd rather gripe. Of course, then she smiled and kind of knew how ridiculous she was being. But I think that's some of us sometimes. We just rather gripe. I know that's me at times. So, yeah, let us know what you'd rather gripe about. Um, and right now, there's a lot to complain and gripe about, isn't there? You know, there's all these racial tensions, there's a global health crisis, there are economic and financial and political issues going on right now. We're limited on what we can do and where we can go and who we can do those things with. Uh, you know, I think they qualify as trials of many kinds. So why does James think it's so important to start out his letter with such an outrageous statement as to rejoice in all of these trials? Well, he tells us in the next verse, which says, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Now, I have to admit, perseverance isn't my first go-to when I wake up in the morning. I don't wake up thinking, "Ooh, I hope I could, get more perseverance or endurance today." That's just not the first thing I'm looking for. But I do like the part about not lacking anything, because too often I feel like I lack a lot. There are things that I just can't quite attain to. The message says, so that you may become mature and well developed, not deficient in any way. And I would really like not to be deficient in any way. I don't know about you, but I'm a perfectionist, so I would really like to not be deficient in any way. And too often I feel very deficient. The New Living Translation also says it well. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. And it'd really be nice not to need anything, wouldn't it? Now, I understand, James McCracken told me, that the Greek word for endurance or perseverance carries the idea of being under a heavy load, and still having to make the journey, being able to complete your journey, or you're getting to your destination under that load, kind of like a pack animal that's all loaded down and still has to make that trip carrying all its baggage with it. And sometimes we feel that way, don't we? We are loaded down, we feel under a heavy burden, and yet life goes on and we have to keep going. We have to keep moving forward. And persevering, this word means that we can get through it. We can make it to wherever we're going with this burden. Now, I'm not much into fitness. I like to walk, but I'm not one for going to the gym and doing weight training. However, I have a lot of friends that like CrossFit. Randy Strickland here at the church loves CrossFit and goes and does it all the time. A lot of people on the worship team are into CrossFit. I have a niece that's into CrossFit. And from what I understand, they say that CrossFit is a combination of weight training and conditioning that pushes you to your limits. And your goal is to build strength and overall fitness. Now, I've heard people after a workout, especially like Randy will come back after working out at noon and say how much his legs hurt or his arms hurt, and how sore he is after a workout. And so I think, okay, why do you go back and do it? Well, they say because they're making a better version of themselves. They like the way they feel after the soreness wears off. They like the way they feel after a workout and the energy and the stamina that it gives them. But to get to that point of improving their fitness, they have to test their bodies. They have to push themselves to the limit of what they can or cannot do. And yes, it's going to hurt. Kind of the old slogan, no pain, no gain, right? If you were a football or baseball or basketball or softball, soccer person, training was very important, right? And you had to test your bodies to make it do what you wanted it to do when there was a game, when it was important. And I think that's what James is talking about in his letter. We are not going to become the kind of people we want to be unless we go through some challenges. And that's where we learn. That's where we grow. Uh, but we never look forward to those tough times. At least I know I don't. I don't wake up in the morning going, "Ooh, I hope I have some really good problems and challenges today." That's just, not what I wake up praying, "Please, Lord, let this be a good day. Let me accomplish all I need to get accomplished." And yet, there's probably not a day that goes by that there's not some problem of some sort. And I can tell you, as a teacher, I don't think I've ever seen a student go, "Yay, it's test day. I've been looking forward to this all week." They are, usually dreading test day. It's just not something we look forward to. However, how else do we know if we've gotten better? Do we know if we learned anything from our last test? And so James tells us to find joy in the tough times because they make us better, and they help us know how we are becoming better. Now, our usual strategy for achieving joy is, trying to avoid or eliminate the things that hurt. We try to get rid of pain, sometimes just by numbing the nerve ends. Sometimes we get rid of any insecurity by eliminating risks, or maybe we get rid of disappointments by depersonalizing any of our relationships. However, that's not healthy in any way, and then we try to lighten that boredom of that kind of life by entertainment or vacations, which are not bad, but they're not going to bring us lasting happiness or lasting joy. And right now, I think we live in a time where everyone's goal is to be perpetually healthy and constantly happy. But that's not really realistic, is it? Pain and trials are unavoidable because life happens. And a lot of times it's totally unexpected. I can tell you 2020 has been totally unexpected in a lot of different ways. And I think we can all agree to that. And joy is not an escape from sorrow. Pain and hardship come, but they don't have to drive out our happiness. There's plenty of suffering, but joy comes because God knows how to wipe away our tears. And happiness is the delight of knowing that all things are working together for good to those who love God. The joy that develops in our lives as we grow as believers doesn't come from feeling good about ourselves, but about God. Because his ways are dependable and his promises are sure. The Apostle Paul tells us the same thing in Romans 5, verses 3 through 5. If I can find it here. He says, let me do it out of this other version. I like it better, I think. We can rejoice when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance. And there's that word again. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. And this is my favorite part. This hope will not lead to disappointment, for we know how dearly God loves us. And then verse 11 of that same chapter says, so now we can rejoice in our wonderful new relationship with God because our Lord Jesus Christ has made us friends of God. I think it's hard to gripe and complain when we realize how much God loves us. It's more a cause of making us shout for joy and praise. The secret, I think, is to focus on the who, not the what. And I'm not talking about, when I say who, I'm not talking about the World Health Organization, okay? I'm talking about Jesus. 2 Corinthians says, so we don't look at the trouble we can see now, rather we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. And then Hebrews 12 says, to fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. I guess that's how Paul and Silas sang songs of praise when they were in prison. They were not so much focused on what they were going through, on where they were, as on who was in there with them and on what he was doing in them and through them, helping them grow, not in spite of maybe, but because of their problems. Now, to clarify, perseverance isn't resignation. It's not putting up with things the way they are or staying in the same old rut year after year after year after year. Okay, it's not being a doormat for people to wipe their feet on. Eugene Peterson says, endurance is not a desperate hanging on, but a traveling from strength to strength. Perseverance is triumphant and alive. God is persevering. He sticks to his relationships with us. Perseverance is not the result of our determination. It is the result of God's faithfulness. We survive in the way of faith, not because we have extraordinary stamina, but because God sticks with us. Peterson suggests that maybe we should make a map of the faithfulness of God rather than to chart the rise and fall of our own enthusiasms, which I know for me can be erratic at best. My highs and lows tend to waver at any given moment. And so that's not a bad idea. Charting out, mapping out the way that God has been faithful to you or to us through the years, through the tough times. Looking around these days, I can say I don't see a lot of joy. I see a lot of shouting and finger pointing, complaining and judging and blaming, shaming. Maybe it's because people are spending too much time and too much attention to everything that's gone wrong, everything that's bad, and how much they're hurting or inconvenienced. And they're not willing to learn and grow from their circumstances. So what would change if our voices began to lift in praise and worship and joy instead of griping and accusing and yelling? Would anything be different if we started seeing opportunities to grow and mature and become what God has called us to be in the middle of this pandemic? As we face all these racial and economic and political crises. I don't know all the answers. You probably don't either, but God does. And I'm talking to myself here. Let's keep our eyes focused on God and see what he does in the middle of all this craziness. How he grows and matures us and changes the world through us. And right now, we actually have an opportunity to change the world, at least our little corner of it, because we have what we call our Kids Clothing Extravaganza coming up at the end of August. And we have some opportunities to help with that. You can help on the day of that event, help hand out clothes, or you can help leading up to it, helping sort clothes. I know we need all kinds of help sorting clothes because we're not going to do it the same way we've done before. We're not going to let people into our building to look through the clothes. We're going to already have them pre-packaged up and hand them out as kind of a drive-through on August the 29th is the day of the event. So if you're interested in helping out either beforehand or the day of, you can go to our app and sign up there, or you can call the office. We have sign-up sheets here in the office. We also, if you are needing that, if you've got children going back to school and you're hurting for clothes, you can sign up on the app as well and put down their sizes and their ages and what the needs are, and we can help you out that way. So please check that out. And I just want to challenge you during this time. Let's stop looking at everything that's wrong, and let's start counting everything as joy. I know it's going to be a challenge for me, but let's start thinking about joy instead of what's wrong and fixing our eyes on Jesus. So that's what I've got for you. We'll hear, I don't know who's up next week. Do you know, James?
Next week, we're going to be on the staff retreat.
Oh, that's right. Next week, we're going to be on a staff retreat. And I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to do something fun next week. So and I don't know what time for sure we'll do it either, but we'll post it and let you know. So make sure you catch up with us next week. It'll be a lot of fun. So anyway, good to be with you this afternoon, and we'll see you later.